Now, despite having so many miles, the engine is very, very reliable and pulls very strong, as you can see. Still, you're in the market for a used Infiniti G37. Well, today I've got a 2009 Infiniti G37 with 171,000 miles. And we're gonna talk about how the exterior has held up, how the interior has held up, and how the car drives. We're gonna also take it on the road to talk about the suspension components, how the transmission and the engine has held up so far. So yeah, this is my personal car. It's a 2009 Infiniti G37. This is the sport model, so you can see that it has the bigger rims. These are the 18-inch versus the 17-inch you'll get on your regular G37. So right off the bat, we can talk about the exterior, and you can clearly see the headlights are very, very faded. Now, I'll be honest, I absolutely love this car for how it has held up, but there's definitely some things that you want to be mindful of if you're buying a used one, and something where Infiniti could have done a little bit better than some of the competitors. Now, in terms of the exterior, the paint has held up pretty good. I don't see any major peeling. Of course, it's got, some of the rock chips and some scratches. Again, the car is 16 years old, but there's no fading or clear coat peeling on this G37, which was a common issue for Nissans of that era. So I think that has held up very well. You can clearly see one of the things that hasn't held up well is these yellow headlights. So that is pretty common on these cars. If you're getting a used one, that the headlights are prone to just kind of fading and being all hazy and yellowish. Now, of course, this is a very easy fix. You can swap out for new headlights, or you can just use one of the kits, which I'm gonna be doing on my car because it's been a while, where you can actually kind of fix the yellow headlights and pretty much make it look brand new. Other than that, I think the exterior has held up very well. We'll talk about the sunroof in a bit too, because sunroof is one of the common failure points for these G37s, or even if you have a G35 in this body shape. But like you see, there is no peeling or nothing going on with that. So the paint has held up well, especially if you get a car that is very well maintained, where they've kind of washed it properly, waxed the car. You're not going to have a lot of issues with the paint. I obviously haven't taken care of that car that well. As you can see, it's pretty dirty right now. So this is more of a daily driver. I wash it when I feel like it. But if you have someone, but if you're washing the car regularly, or if you're getting a used one that has been waxed regularly, you're not going to have issues like that. But let's go to the interior, because that's where we have some of the issues with this car, with the interior. And I mean, they're not that terrible, but just something I want to point out. Some of those are pretty common. So if you're getting a used one, you would just want to make sure that your car or your specific example doesn't have those. All right, so this is what the interior looks like on this G37. And the seats, this is the driver's seat, and you can see it has a couple tiers overall. So the seats themselves, depending on the condition, how it was used, the leather and all of that, it's not that common for the seats to kind of rip like this, but I don't really notice it, and so I don't really mind this one as much. There's a tier on the rear as well. This was there when we actually bought the car, so you can see that this almost feels like something kind of slashed against the rear seats. Just looking at it from this angle, you can see there's no obvious signs of a lot of wear and tear on the G37 interior. Of course, as you get closer, you will see some instances where the interior hasn't aged perfectly. But trust me, this car is all about driving dynamics and just enjoying the car. So while the interior is functional, it gets the job done. Now, interior is obviously going to depend on how the car was taken care of. And of course, this one has 171,000 miles. So it has a lot more miles than most people would be buying the car at. So I've had this car for a long time, so you can see. But if you're getting a little bit cleaner example, these are just the kind of things you want to be mindful of. So let's take a look at those specifics as to what could go wrong with the interior of the G37. One of the common ones is going to be your steering wheel. As you can see, the paint here is starting to peel off. Same goes here, and even the leather is pretty worn out. We actually had to take the top portion, so this is just the rubber now. The leather portion is here, because this was basically coming off, so we had to cut it out. But yeah, I mean, the steering wheel, the materials used are really good, especially if you get the sport model. You get the really nice pedal shifters, but this is gonna, you can kind of paint over it, and they sell kits for that specifically, but this is gonna be one of the common failure points for your G37, where this peels off. Even the leather hasn't aged really well. Now, of course, this is a 16-year-old car with 171,000 miles. So it's taken a lot of beating. But that's one thing, if you're getting a car that's over 100,000 miles, which most of them are at this point, just make sure you take good care of the steering wheel and the interior in general. Other than that, it is common for these dash to crack, but as you can see, the dash has held up really well on my example, but I have seen some where you'll see some dash cracking over there, but nothing here where I'm concerned with the interior quality. The screen still works, the AC and all those components, like all of the buttons, everything works, the clock works, so I think the usability of the interior has held up really good. Even the door pad, the leather on the door, all of that has held up really well. I mean, for a 16-year-old car with 171,000 miles, I kind of have to say I am impressed with the build quality. I think most cars, when you get them to be like this old, they are going to have issues. They're not going to be perfect. So this one isn't perfect either. You've got some steering wheel issues, you've got some leather that's like ripping and all of that stuff. It really comes down to maintenance that you're doing on your car, how careful you are, how routinely you maintain your car in terms of interior, not just the mechanical components. But yeah, other than that, I think it's looking pretty good to me. So let's take it out on the road, talk about how the car drives and what do you need to know about mechanically in terms of how the G37 is going to hold up. Now, before we go out on the road, I just do want to point it out that this one has a 3.7 liter V6 engine, and some of these engines are known to burn oil, so that's going to be, I mean, this one has been pretty good. We haven't had issues with burning oils or any leaks so far, but that is one of the common failure points of these engines. You'll see a lot of burnt oil, so if you are getting a used one, just make sure the oil is good, and if you already bought one, just maybe, keep an eye on the oil level for a little while until you're familiar with the car, just to make sure there's no issues with it. Yeah, one more thing to mention is the sunroof. So the sunroofs on these cars are very common to leak, and as you can see with this discoloration here, mine has leaked here and there, where if it rains very heavily, I can feel the water coming down the drain from here, or even on the passenger side. So sunroof is a very common thing with these cars. And I've been lucky so far, but I've heard issues where once it goes to the body control module, the BCM, it could cause major electrical problems. So if you are buying one, I'll probably take a water bottle with you and just kind of pour it on top and see if it's going to be leaking here, because if it is, you don't want that car. Mine had the leak develop after I bought the car, so I'm kind of stuck with it until I get the sunroof fixed. But that's going to be one key component. You want to make sure you don't get a G37 with a leaking sunroof. All right, so let's go for a drive. Let's get back in the car and we're going to take her out on the road, talk about how the suspension is held up, how it drives mechanically, the 7-speed transmission, even the paddle shifter response, and of course the engine. Now, despite having so many miles, the engine is very, very reliable and pulls very strong, as you can see. These engines are pretty much bulletproof, and they have been used in pretty much all of the Nissans and Infinitis that the 3.7 liter, you're pretty much going to find it everywhere. And Nissan has really perfected this VQ motor. It started with a 3.5 liter, and there's been different iterations of this motor, and finally got it up to 3.7 liter. And I have to say, the engine is extremely reliable. Car pulls very strong, and I've had no issues with this engine. I absolutely love this engine. It drives pretty much very tame if you want it to be, but if you want to give it gas, it goes. Now, giving it gas, and as you can probably saw, there was a slight delay, is the 7-speed transmission. Now, the 7-speed transmission is known to be a little slow. Now, compared to some of the modern automatics out there, like the 8-speed transmission, the ZFA, the 10-speed transmissions, it is definitely a lot slower. I have a 10-speed Mustang, and compared to that, the 7-speed is very slow. Now, for day-to-day driving, I have to say it's pretty responsive. It gets the job done. It is pretty good. I have no major complaints with this transmission. Would I prefer it to be a little bit more snappy? Of course. But you have to remember, this car is almost 16 years old, so you're not going to get the snappy responsiveness of some of the modern transmissions. My transmission has been pretty good, but I've heard issues with the 7-speed transmission. So if you are currently looking for a 7-speed transmission G37, you want to make sure you kind of really push the car and get on a little bit just to see how the transmission is behaving, if there's any slippage, if there's extreme delays in shifting. So that way you want to make sure that you're not getting a car with a beat up transmission, because these 7-speed transmissions, they're not as common as maybe the CVTs to be crashing, but it's still one of the transmission that is known to be slightly weak, especially if you're gonna mod the car. This is pretty much stock right now, but if you're gonna mod the car, you definitely want to be careful and not make sure you have issues with the transmission. Now let's talk about the suspension a little bit on this car. The suspension is still pretty good. This one specifically needs a little bit suspension work, but in terms of, just going over bumps, it still holds up pretty good. It's got a little bit noise coming from the suspension, but that's kind of common depending on, I don't think it has had the suspension service in a long time, so it's definitely due for some springs and struts. But in terms of how the car drives, how the car handles, like this car still loves to go on some back roads. It still does it pretty well if the roads are rough. So you have to remember this is a sporty sedan, so the suspension can be a little bit more stiff. But in terms of how it has held up, I am pretty impressed with the suspension setup on this one. Like it's still pretty good. It's 171,000 miles in. Now, if you're getting a used one, I would recommend getting a rehaul of the suspension. Nothing on extreme side, but just making sure you're getting your springs and struts kind of taken care of, the sway bars and some of the bushing that have been used up for 16 plus years. Because 2009 is the first year of the G37. It had the similar body style for 2007 and 8, but it had the G35. If you're getting a G37, it's going to be 16 years old at least. Which, of course, like most cars at that point, are going to give you some sort of suspension work. Even if you're getting one of the reliable Toyotas or Hondas, they're going to have some suspension work that's going to be needed. Other than that, the car rides really good. The power is there. The suspension is good. Transmission is good. The only thing in those major components I would say you want to make sure is going to be the 7-speed transmission, because the 7-speed transmission has issues. That's where it could get very expensive. So if you're test driving a car, if you're test driving a used one, you want to make sure you get on the car a little bit. Don't abuse the car, of course, but get on a little bit, accelerate the car a little bit heavily, maybe use the paddle shifters, and that's really going to tell you if the 7-speed transmission is, has been beaten to death, or has been abused really badly, or it can actually hold up, and especially if you're using for daily driving. Now, of course, if you're going to modify it, you kind of start taking a gamble with the 7-speed transmission. But yeah, that's the review of how the G37 has held up in 16 years with 171,000 miles. Me personally, I would still recommend this car. It's a very fun car to drive. They're depreciated so much these days that you can actually pick them up for, with some high miles for relatively cheap. And for the package that this car offers with slight luxury, you've got good powertrain with the 7-speed transmission, the 3.7 liter V6 motor. All of that just kind of makes this car a lot more fun to drive than some of the other options in that price range. And if you get some of the high mileage ones, that's where you start winning, because these cars are pretty reliable and you don't have to worry about any major issues with these cars. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video on how the G37 has held up in 16 years. And if you did, make sure you smash this like button and comment below what are your thoughts, or what's the highest mileage G37 you have seen. And of course, subscribe to Red 50 for more videos.